Good morning, it's Billy Turriff here. I am a full-time property investor and developer and founder of Kensington Finance. What I wanted to do today was share with you a case study of a property we closed on yesterday. It's a property that I got involved in 2015, and I actually acquired the property through a lease option. The last 4 years it's really been up and down with the property, so I really wanted to talk through first off how I acquired the property, what the financials were for the deal, what then went wrong with the lease option, and then how I worked to get a successful conclusion to the actual acquisition of the property yesterday. So in terms of sourcing the property, it was 2015. So I was actually based in Dubai at that time. It was my mastermind year, so I was pretty busy acquiring a reasonable sized portfolio that would enable me to leave the day job and be a full-time property investor in the UK in 2016. Because I was 6,000 kilometres away, that year for my sourcing I really had to kind of turn into a detective, and I managed to get quite a few deals online. This deal was quite interesting. So it was a Facebook page, I think it was UK Property Traders, and someone else had actually put the deal up and had basically presented it as, would someone do a lease option that was going to spin out about £400 a month cash flow before costs, after finance costs, but before any maintenance or agency costs, and it was for a 5-figure sum. And it was one of these posts. There was quite a lot of people saying, no, just your return wouldn't be enough, it'd take too long to get your money back, it's not a large enough initial cash flow that you're going to get from it. I was a little bit surprised by some of the comments, because the bit I didn't understand was the person who put the deal forward had said that the seller wanted a 5-figure sum, but he'd never said what the sum was, yet everyone had kind of made comments about saying the deal didn't stack. Now, my view is a 5-figure sum could be anything from £10,000 to £99,999. And in my figures, doing it as a 10,000 purchase, you've got cash flow of roughly say 400. It would give you about £5,000, just shy of £5,000 a year profit before any kind of maintenance costs came in. So that would be about a 50% return. And remembering it's on a lease option, so you didn't have to pay your stamp duty at the time, you didn't have to pay mortgage fees, etc. And the sale price was actually at the market value, so there's quite a good chance you're actually going to get capital growth from it. So anyway, I kind of thought, right, I'm going to contact the person who posted it. He then responded to me and said that it was a friend of his, but he didn't like to be known in social media, and he was quite a private person, and therefore he didn't really want to share the details of the person. I said, okay, thank you, appreciate that. When he'd actually said that, though, I worked out, I knew who the person was. He was a person that used to, well, I thought he was a person that used to post on Property Tribes, which is another forum. So I, again, been in a couple of forums, posted some stuff, knew his name, but had no idea who he was. So I didn't have any contact details for him. So I went on to LinkedIn, searched for him, found him on LinkedIn, sent him an email and said, could be right, could be wrong, but I think you've got a deal that you're maybe looking to sell on. Would it be of interest to you? Didn't really hear anything back for about 4 weeks or so. I think I dropped him another one and said, look, do you have a deal, don't you have a deal? And probably about 2-3 weeks later he came back and said, sorry, I don't really check LinkedIn very much. But yeah, I'd be happy to have a chat about it with you. So first thing is, just in terms of, is possible to kind of find people online, but you do have to turn into kind of an investigation style a little bit. When I then spoke to the person, it was quite interesting. I mean, he knew that he kind of held all the cards. He probably controlled the negotiation quite strong from his side, in terms of saying he wasn't particularly motivated, will only do it under certain terms. But the terms were 10,000 to buy it. The rent was, I think, about 580, 590, and the mortgage payments were about 180. So those terms worked for me. So again, from my perspective, from sourcing, it's not about who wins a, inverted comma, negotiation. It's about do the deal, does the figures ultimately work for me, and do they ultimately work for him? The reason he wanted the money was he was doing far bigger deals at that time, and he said he just wanted the money to do a speculative investment. The other thing, though, that I should say that was important was that he'd actually bought this deal when you could do buy and rent back. And one of the key things that he wanted out of the deal was he had kind of loyalty to the person he bought the house from, and he didn't want some investor to come in and exit the tenant. And that actually appealed to me, to the point that this used to be the person's home. I knew that he wasn't likely to go anywhere, and the last thing I wanted to do was to turn around the tenants when I'm in Dubai. So part of the deal that he wanted as well was to agree that unless the tenant got into 3 months of arrears, he wouldn't be asked to leave the property. So my point is, again, work out if the deal wins for you, and ultimately if it wins for them. If you're listening to what they're saying and you're doing what they say, then just do the deal. Give the seller everything they want. So that was kind of all fine. This is now probably where the story starts to go off the rails a little bit. I was then working with another company who were actively sourcing me some lease option deals, and they were a full-time sourcing company for lease options, quite well known in the UK. They've got significant lease option portfolios that they work for. I'd never at this point actually executed a lease option, so I spoke to them about it, asked if they would put the paperwork together, so doing like the power of attorney, doing the RX1, doing the UN1, etc. And they agreed to it. They said they didn't normally do it, they only normally did the legals for their own deals, but as a one-off case for me, for £1,000, they would happily do it. So long story short, I appointed them. They then did the deal. It did take some time. I remember we were waiting to get the seller to send all the paperwork. Kind of went back and forth. So again, that was another bit of a red flag from kind of an admin process side. This wasn't really going well, but probably after about 6-7 weeks, we got everything agreed. I transferred the money to him. I had then just assumed, because this company had come across as professional, they'd done lots of lease options, all the legals would be 100% done. What I didn't find out until 3 years later was, whilst I'd kind of paid for everything, and whilst I'd signed all the documentation, and the seller had also sent in the relevant documentation, they hadn't actually registered the RX1 or the UN1 land registry. Just for anyone who doesn't know, an RX1 is a restriction on the title. So when you get a lease option, one of the things you want to do is put a restriction on the title, so the person can't actually then go and sell the property without you knowing about it. A UN1 also tells you if something's happening with the property, so it's second down, but it's two things you need to have in cover to make sure it's working. The other thing that you sign with a kind of a management contact and a letter of authority to say that you've got the authority to manage the mortgage for the person. And this was probably another red flag for me. So one of the things, when I was talking to the seller, he wanted to have control of making sure the mortgage payments were being paid from his side in case I didn't pay, to make sure that he didn't get into arrears or anything. Again, I just listened to him and I just agreed to that. I really strongly recommend that if you're going to do this yourself, that you should take responsibility and make sure that you pay the payments, because what happened to me was the person actually stopped paying them. The second thing I didn't do was I just assumed that he would be paying them as I was transferring the money each month. So if you are in a position when the person is paying them, you really want to be asking for a copy of their bank statements, copy of the mortgage statement every couple of months, so you know that the payments that you are making are going to the right place. And remember here as well, I paid £10,000 up front for a lease option fee, so there was a significant amount of capital from my own end in. Anyway, that continued though for about 7-8 months. I kind of had a few conversations back and forth with the seller just about other deals that were going on. And when I then came back to the UK in 2016, I ended up doing a personal loan to the person as well. So I now had lease option in place, and I had a personal loan in place for the person as well. So just kind of thought, yeah, it's someone else I'm doing business with. everything's fine, we'll continue as normal. Where probably the third red flag I would say is that I don't really know this person, so it's fine finding someone on Facebook, finding them on LinkedIn, whether it's then appropriate to do loans to the person, you know, on an unsecured basis, and also a lease option that are not necessarily the simplest way to acquire properties. I'd probably recommend that you either do it with the very watertight stuff from a solicitor, or you maybe have far more control over your lending and security. What then happened, and this is really when the deal started to go wrong, and I just want to backstep as well. I don't think the person went into this process to do any of these deals wrong. I think the reality was he had lots of other business deals he was doing, and one fell down, and then the whole set of cards fell down. But the reality is deals go wrong, and it's really important that you then work through them in a clear and transparent process. And that really didn't happen with us, you know. So there was a couple of payments that got missed. I had kind of conversations with him, kind of assured there was no issue about the deal, that they just had cash flow problems, showed me the planning gain documents on it, etc., etc. It then, payments became more sporadic, etc. And this probably went on for about 12 months, when it's probably a case of about 4 or 5 months in arrears. I then started to take it a bit more seriously, and there was another red flag. I took too long to act on this. Was then really pushing to say, right, I want an undertaking from the solicitor that when this property is sold, that my funds will be paid back. Wasn't really getting that undertaking. I then started to do a bit more research, and then found out the individual was in some bad situations with other people who had lent him money. So I was then slightly concerned, because I was aware that, you know, this loan that was in default wasn't likely to get it back, or get it back anytime soon. But I also had this lease option that I knew if this individual was to go bankrupt, it would put the lease option in jeopardy. And then he wasn't really, you know, responding to legal letters, etc. His office had changed. I had to pay for a person to kind of find out his new address, etc. So then came that he basically said, well, if you execute the lease option, then you write off your loan and we'll call it quits. I obviously wasn't prepared to do that, because, you know, there were two separate deals, and it would be me giving away £30,000 of a loan plus a whole chunk of interest as well. So we dealt with his first solicitor, and when that started, he then said, okay, can you please share with me all the lease option documents? I then went back to that lease option company I dealt with first, said, you know, we're ready to exercise this, you need to share the information. What had then happened was, this is when I then found out the RX1, the UN1 were not in place, and unfortunately the individual who I dealt with at that time had left that company. Again, I don't think this company set out to do anything deliberate. I think it was someone that just hadn't finished their job, but it put me in a difficult situation. Theoretically, I could have taken a case against that company, asked them to claim their personal indemnity insurance, but the last thing I really wanted to do was spend any time trying to go to court with everyone. What was then even more complex, though, was because I'd been in Dubai at the time and I'd sent them all the paperwork, I stupidly hadn't taken photocopies of everything, just, you know, kind of got them signed, got them witnessed, and sent it to them. That person had gone, taken a whole lot of his files with it, and in it were actually all the documents. So I had emails back and forth saying we were doing deals. I had an email back and forth saying money was getting transferred over, etc. But, you know, I didn't actually have the signed lease option agreement. Luckily, the owner of that company went back through their documents, and they found from their server that they had some of them saved, basically, and they did have the letter of authority saved and the management agreement, and he was quite confident that I could actually use that from taking over the mortgage, and I had the authority to do it. Spoke to a solicitor, was told there's a bit of a grey area, and again, I didn't really want to go through it. So he would have known that, you know, that if I wanted to you know, get the loan back, you know, the kind of last remit for me was to go down the bankruptcy route. He obviously didn't want to do that. Works in property. He's got a number of businesses. So it was then also in his best interest to come to an agreement to enable me to execute the lease option and to get a basis to repay the loan. And then just to be clear, so in repaying the loan, I've written off a significant amount of interest, and it's basically an interest-free loan. So everything from my side in terms of what was committed to, I've done, and I have lost out from it. But again, in life, there's times you've got to pick your battles. I wanted to fight the battle, try and get everything I was going to get. I knew you couldn't afford it. The only way to try and do that would be to put him bankrupt. If someone goes bankrupt, you just get so many pennies in the pound. So it just wasn't worth it. So we came to an agreement, as I said. We did the loan basically interest-free over 5 years, on the basis I could then exercise the lease option. That was signed November last year, so kind of thought, happy days, let's just get on with this. And it was also taking up a lot of time in my head in terms of energy, etc. And it's just not good. I'd rather be working on stuff that's moving forward rather than relationships that are kind of draining and pulling energy away when where everyone's saying one thing and then the next day something different happens. So anyway, I think solicitors were appointed probably in January, February at the start of this year to actually exercise the option. The solicitor he'd used was kind of one off the shelf, probably as cheap as chips, not local to him. It's taken a long time to get ID sent to them from his side, taking him time to get his down payment, 300, 400 quid to use the fees, etc. Again, in hindsight, I should have probably just paid that to try and have made stuff go quicker. But anyway, it was dragging on. At the same time, I was aware that he hadn't made any payments from our loan agreement over the time period. So I was getting more concerned, but I was also aware I didn't want to push the loan agreement at that time until I could exercise the option. And I realised the reason I wanted to exercise the option was that it was cash flowing me positively, but in addition, the price of the house had gone up significantly since I purchased it in 2015. And I was aware that if this person was to go bankrupt, or I wasn't going to be able to exercise the option, potential to lose out on the loan, but then also to lose out on the equity gain in the house. So I was just kind of tapping away at the solicitors, trying to get stuff done and struggling basically. I then get a message, I think September this year, saying the bank have actually taken over the property because the person who I was buying it from hadn't been making the payments that I'd been sending him every month. So again, what he did was wrong, because I've been sending him money. I don't know what he did with it, but it wasn't where it was meant to be going. Two, though, from my side, I should have been asking to see that the payments were being made and asking for statements. So then got into conversation with the bank and the administrator saying, this is the situation, I've actually got the tenant in there, they've got an AST with me, there's people there, we're part way through a purchase. What the bank had then said, and it's the first time I've seen it, they kind of call it semi-administration or taking over the house, whereby there's a sale going through, they'll let you get on with the sale and do it as long as the sale will clear their arrears, basically. And they don't fully take it over because again, the banks, they don't really want to repossess people. So they basically sold it to me and saying that they would also help the solicitors push it along. So I kind of thought, great. Seller had agreed to that. It kind of went to the point, can you do this in 48 hours and then everything's fine. This was, as I said, September, October. I ran about to raise the money then to get it done. And what I should say is before that, I kind of spent money in getting valuations done in the house, etc. But because solicitors were too slow, the valuations had run out. So I was kind of losing money in this. But when the house was taken back by the bank in September, October, I was told I had 48 hours to raise the money. Managed to get the money in 48 hours, which was 110,000. But the reality was the solicitors were still dragging their feet. Came to the point, believe it or not, when we actually had 2 redemption statements. So one in November and one then in December. Basically, they got the one in November, but they took about a week to act on it, and by the time that they'd sent it to my solicitor, they'd missed the dates. They had to then request it again, etc. The reality was, so the mortgage, as I said, I was buying for 110. The mortgage when I'd taken the house was roughly about 109. The arrears had now gone up to about 112 and a half. So it was agreed that I would buy it basically at about 112 and a half. That's all then going fine. Then it kind of came to, the person was then struggling to pay his legal fees. He paid half of them, again, so I think he wasn't doing anything wrong. I think he's just really struggling for money. Basically said, let me take care of the rest of the legal fees. We'll add that to the loan. Let's just get this done. So thankfully yesterday we did actually get it done. So we've now taken back ownership of the house. So today we're going to get in contact with the tenants again, get in contact with administrators, make sure we do the change of AST, make sure we get gas search and all that stuff sent back over, and put the house back in the portfolio. The reality is that it's not been there for a couple of months. The good point to me though is that the last house in the street, very similar setup, sold at about 180,000. Remembering how I bought this house at 112 and a half, so probably got about, it's not as good as it sounds. It sounds like 70,000 in terms of gain on the deal. The reality is the house is sold at 180, a new bathroom, new kitchen. When you knock off 20,000, there's probably about a £50,000 gain in equity from doing the lease option. And ultimately that's from putting down, say, £10,000 at the start. So it's kind of a 500% return on that over 4 or 5 years. A couple of key lessons to me though from the project, One, I've done a number of lease options. I've done them on development sites. I've done them on buy-to-lets. I've also given up a couple that haven't worked. So lease options are an important tool that can be used to acquire property, but I really recommend people know what they're doing before they get into it. Secondly, in terms of who you do joint ventures with, it's very easy to do a deal with someone that you meet. It's very easy to talk through a deal and talk about what the future will be. It's not till stuff goes wrong and I'm not saying that you see the real person, but stuff does go wrong in property, and it's how people react when stuff goes wrong that really, to me, tells how strong our relationship is. And the reality is, particularly doing stuff like loans to someone that you've just had a couple of conversations with, that you've seen posts that they've done on Facebook, posts that they've done on Property Tribe, posts that they've done on LinkedIn, isn't really enough. What I know now in terms of stuff from Companies House, proper due diligence, I just didn't know back then. But the reality is, I would say, it's going to be like Warren Buffett talks about, you're going to do 20 deals in a year, that's all you can do. To really say to you should think about that for joint venture people. You can only work with 3-4 people. Are you really sure this is the right person to work with you? And you're only going to do that if you know the person very well. You're not going to do that knowing them from Facebook, etc. Third thing is, I didn't pay proper fees for my legal advice for this, but the reality was the release option company used solicitors, and even with solicitors again, check that they've put the documents in place, make sure your RX1 is there, your UN1 is there, and don't just assume that you're paying a professional that it'll get done. Fourth item, I kind of recommend as a result of this is I would act straight away. I let things chip away at this too long, and whilst it's turned out good for me in the end, it's definitely sucked away a lot of my energy for the last 1-2 years probably. You're kind of having to do a little bit of work on it each week, and the work itself is not the difficulty. It's being in a deal that's got negative energy, that you're not getting called back, that you're getting told different things, that you're having to be, also I'm having to be relatively aggressive with a person to kind of a backward step. Some of it's all a bit of a game, let's be honest as well. The game for me was to make sure I could protect what I put in and maximise my return. The game for him was to probably see, could he get out of this and move on. But I'd rather do stuff that is just straight and it's clear. But I think the last point was that a lot of people, I think, in my situation would have just given up. Well, they don't want to do things. They'd have either just given up and kind of walked away and said it is what it is, or they would have gone down the bankruptcy route. If they'd gone down the bankruptcy route, they'd have got pennies in the pound. So actually, financially, I'm pretty sure the strategy I've done is worked out the best for the arrangements that we were in. And my point with that is that sometimes just chipping away at stuff, just turning up, looking at it, knowing that you're going to get problems hit at you, but just chipping away at it each week, you will get a positive result from it. There's a number of key lessons that I've taken away from this deal. First off, lease options can be a powerful tool in terms of if you can gain from the equity in the market. I've also used lease options for some of my development deals, and they've given us time to go and get our planning, etc. With lease options though, you really need to make sure you've got good solicitors on board. So I would use solicitors rather than a lease option firm, which is one of the mistakes I did. And also, even with a solicitor, I would check up that they've actually done the legal stuff that you've paid them to do, to make sure you're totally covered. Third is, this is in terms of who you actually want to work with. It's very easy to do a deal with someone, it's very easy to meet someone at a property, networking meeting, meet someone online, but how well do you really know the person? It's not until deals start to maybe go a bit wrong, and there's some challenges, that you actually see how people react to this, and you actually then realise whether that's someone that you want to be in a joint venture partnership with, or just a business relationship, full stop. So again, I do probably now work with a lot less people than what I used to work with 4 or 5 years ago. Some of that's for just less people to manage, but also realise that it takes time to know people, and it takes time to build up a relationship, and it takes time to see how people operate. And then finally, from my side, is that chipping away at things will get you an end result. I would have loved to have had the loan paid back in time. I'd have loved to have exercised this deal when I could have done as per the contract. Sometimes in property that doesn't happen, but I think what I find in property is that as long as you know you're going in the right direction, everything will take longer than it should do, everything will cost more than it should do. It's the nature of the business. But what makes people be able to kind of execute deals successfully is just turning up every week and doing one bit of it at a time. Anyway, so I thought I'd share that with you. To me, it's a good end to the year. It's something I just wanted to get away from. I've been spending too much time on it for 12 months, but I've got a really good equity gain from it as well. But there's a lot of lessons learned there about, for people who want to do lease options, what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. So I hope that's helpful for you. Anybody who'd like any information about lease options and what I think about advantages or disadvantages, feel free to comment below or drop me a mail. Thanks for listening, and speak to you soon.